Hello, I'm standing near the top of Doi Inthanon, which is the highest mountain in Thailand. Now looking west, we can see the beginning of the Himalayan mountains. We're at the southeastern corner. Now the Himalayas are the biggest mountain massif in the world and home to an amazing variety of cultures. From here we go to Burma, to Bangladesh, to Nepal, to India, to Pakistan, to Iraq, Iran and Turkey. And all those mountains are home to a huge variety of cultures. And especially in this part of the world, which is northern Thailand. Now my name's John Davis. I came here about 30 years ago and I was blown away really by the number of cultures that you could see in such a short period of time. So in just one day you could walk from 1 to 3 to 5, 6 cultures just in one day. This is like walking from Sweden to Denmark to Belgium to Spain to Italy in one day. Quite amazing. And I wondered why. There are at least 6 different hill tribe groups living in this area. Now each group has its own culture, its own costume, its own way of life, its own religion, and each one of them is as distinct as the countries of Europe. Now why is that? I think the reason is because all these cultures originated in the river valleys of the Himalayas, the great rivers, the Yangtze, the Mekong, the Salween, the Brahmaputra, and others. Now, about 50,000 years ago, the people of this region migrated up these valleys and were then separated from each other by the mountains towards the next valley. So each valley developed its own culture. Now with the growth in population about 100 years ago, these groups started to move back south and ended up in Thailand and Burma and southern China. And that's where they are intermingling now. I'd like to show you a few pictures of some of the tribes, starting with the Karen, who've been here the longest, and each of them will introduce themselves and say what tribe they're in their own culture. Hill tribes actually is not a correct term because they're not really tribes because they don't have a chief. They are minority ethnic groups living in Thailand. So, enjoy. Tablu. Young lady who's going to tell us her name in the Hmong language. So, Pasa Hmong Kunchurai Kap.
Pasa Hmong Kulum Pai Hua Zua.
Oh, that's beautiful, Mac. Very nice, thank you.
Wa Asami Lisuma. Wa Asami Lisu.
And they're working on a tea plantation in Doi Mae Salong, way up near the Myanmar border. Thank you.
Chuaka, Glahuma, Chumila. Got union question.
Thank you. And this is Mien or Yao. And they make the most amazing trousers with these fantastic designs. I can't resist showing you. There. Tam Ang Chamai.
Mane Puan Pun question. Mane Aloma Mane Pun question.
It's not in focus though. Yeah. Alright, we're looking at one of the rivers that flows out of the mountains, down the hillsides and into the lowlands. And all this water during the wet season goes to supply all the crops with the water and the minerals and the nutrients that they need for a fantastically productive rice crop amongst other agricultural products. In fact, Thailand is #1 in the world at rice exporting and #1 in rubber as well. And a lot of it is due to the monsoon rains that bring down all this water for 6 months of the year. And if you can trap it in dams and use it for the whole year, you can get a fantastic amount of food. Right, what we're looking at here is rice fields. Now this is lowland rice, or paddy rice as it's called. And as you probably know, rice is the staple food for more than half the population of the world. But there's two sorts of rice grown here. There's rice in the valleys and rice in the mountains. Now rice in the valleys is much more productive. Now what it needs is a hell of a lot of water. And so I'll get into this rice field so that you can see, checking for cobras first, because cobras like to hide under the water. They won't attack you, but if you tread on them they tend to get a bit pissed off. So here we go, into the water, and okay, so each rice plant is actually buried in a few inches of water. So with the right sort of climate you can get a big crop, and most of Southeast Asia has a monsoon climate, which means that there's 6 months of rain, 6 months of dry. Now if you're in the valleys and you have irrigation, which we have here, there's a stream flowing through here, then you can grow 2 or even 3 crops of rice a year. But if you're in the mountains like the hill tribes are, you don't have the irrigation, and so you can't produce anything like as much food. The land is much poorer. So if you could swing round, John, to the mountains to the west of us and zoom in, we can see this is the area of land where the hill tribes live, and we'll look at some hill tribes fields in a minute when we get up there. Okay, finished. Oh, this is hill tribe rice. It's very different from the paddy rice that's grown down in the valleys. For one thing, it's in dry ground. It's not in water like the paddy rice, and that means that you get much less rice produced. It's much less productive. And also, because you have no irrigation here, you can only grow 1 crop a year, whereas down in the valleys you can get 2 or 3. Now behind me you can see that the land can be very, very steep indeed. Up there you've got a mixture of rice and corn to the right, and some teak trees. Now the problem with this system is that all the nutrients in the land flow down out of the land during the wet season, this is a monsoon season. There are 6 wet months a year. So for those 6 wet months you can grow food, but for the dry months it's much more difficult. And it means that their way of farming is called subsistence farming. That is, they grow just enough food for themselves to use, but not much extra. Now the problem in the future is that there is not enough land to maintain this sort of agriculture. You can farm the same field for 3 or 4 years, take the crops away, but then after that the field is no longer fertile, and you have to move and clear a new area of forest, chop it down and use the fertilizer, use the embers as fertilizers, and then you've got another 3 or 4 years. So the villagers have to move from one field to another, further and further away from the village, so that any one village can only stay in the same place for maybe 20 or 30 years before they run out of useful land. The land will eventually recover, but it takes a very long time. Now this is fine with a small population and a large area of forest. What's happened in Thailand in the last 50 years or so is the population has gone up and the amount of land available has gone down. So they can no longer practice this sort of agriculture, swidden agriculture, or slash and burn as it's called. So what the Thai government did a few years ago was to give the villages ownership of the land they lived on condition that they didn't move. Now that's great, they now own land, but there's a big problem. The land is no good after a few years unless you use fertilizers, and fertilizers cost money. And so you have to produce not the staple crops like rice and corn, but cash crops that you can sell for money. Now there was one cash crop that was grown until the late 80s, and that was opium, which was converted into heroin, and of course that is now illegal because of the huge number of deaths from heavy heroin overdose, and so now it is no longer practiced in Thailand. The last field of opium I saw was many years ago. So what alternatives are available to the hill tribes now? Well, there are some, and we'll look at that in the next scene. Now the cash crop of the hill tribes in the past was the opium from the opium poppy. And here we've got some, which are outside a hill tribe museum in the village above Chiang Mai. Now opium is the perfect cash crop because small volume, high price, easily stored and easily traded. So caravans used to come through this area, which was known as the Golden Triangle because of all the wealth that came from the opium, and pick up the opium from the farmers and then take it down to Bangkok or other cities for sale. So, highly addictive drug, also highly useful. It's used to produce morphine and codeine and other analgesics. But of course now it's quite illegal to grow it. In fact, the last time I saw a field of opium was way back 25 years ago, and at the time the Thai army were busy with flamethrowers destroying it. So this is the old cash crop. Now that's been taken away from the hill tribes. They can't grow them anymore. So what do? We'll find out in the next section. So those little flowers that we saw in the last scene, the opium poppies, have been the cause of millions of deaths of heroin overdoses and several wars. So it's not surprising that they have been banned in Thailand for the last 30 years. The problem is that that was the hill tribe's cash crop. Now once you remove that, how are they going to make enough money to survive if they need fertilizer on the land that they now own? Well, the answer came from the king of Thailand, King Bhumibol, who sadly died a while ago, and he started what's called the Royal Project, where he invested a lot of money in research into what alternative crops can be grown in this landscape. We're up in the mountains where it's quite high and it's cool, so you can grow all sorts of temperate crops. So it started with coffee, and then moved on to a variety of different fruits such as apples and pears, and vegetables such as lettuces and cauliflowers and cabbages, and then avocados, and flower production, which has recently become a major industry. So as you've just seen here, we've got sunflowers, and below that a purple flower and many flowers. Also, if you look to the left, you'll see the car park, and that shows what an important contributor tourism is to the hill tribes these days. These hills are very beautiful, and people from Thailand and from all parts of the world come here to enjoy the natural beauty and also to contribute in part to the hill tribe economies. So this perhaps is the way forward for the hill tribes and will ensure that they have a secure future. I'm at one of the hill tribe markets just to show you what sort of produce they're producing. So on the left here we have cos lettuce, and then peppers, large peppers, and then eucalyptus, and another sort of lettuce, and onions, and then we have tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, thank you, and sweet potatoes.
This is not sweet
And-
potato.
Oh, well, we'll call it that. Avocados, passion fruit, and we don't know what that is, but it's very nice. And dried strawberries, and more avocados. And at the end here, we've got some capsicums. So really a wide range of different crops, cash crops, which are providing the hill tribes with an alternative way of living to the old ways. So tourism is an important part of the hill tribe economy, and their skill at making handicrafts provides a good source of income. And you can see down here many shops, hello Sawadee Cap, selling a mixture of wine and clothing, Yui! Oh. And wine, and homemade wine, and more textiles, and so on. And the quality of their handicrafts is sometimes quite amazing, and all handmade by the villagers, although not that t-shirt. Okay, so these are all Hmong designs, and we go to another part of Thailand and we'll find Lisu designs or Karen designs or Yao. Yao is my favorite. Okay, so lots and lots of interesting, beautiful textiles to buy. Now all the hill tribes, except one, are animists. And what does that mean? It means that they believe in a number of spirits that control the life of them, the village. So there are spirits of the land, and spirits of the water, and spirits of the trees, and most importantly the spirit of the ancestors. And it's an important part of their lives is to keep the spirit world in balance with the human world. So the spirit of the land, for example, you must ask his permission before you clear an area of forest. To the hill tribes, it's a crazy idea to own land. Now recently they've been given it, but it's a very, very new concept for them. So this may be to the spirits of the rivers or the land, and every now and again sacrifices will be made to those spirits to keep them happy. Okay, now there's a number of spirits around here. There's one way over there, but the main one, down to the left there, John, with the roof, is to the spirit of the village itself. Now his name is Apamo, so let's go down and have a look at his shrine. Now this is the shrine to the spirit of Apamo, who is the god of the Lisu village. Now what exactly that means, it's really hard to try and find out, but I'll put it as he is the collective consciousness of all the people in the village. And he has to be worshipped regularly, and he provides protection for the village. Every year there will be a great feast in his honor, and every time anybody is sick or needs a consultation about anything, Apamo will be consulted through the most important man in the village, which is the shaman, because the shaman is the only person who can talk directly to the spirit world. Now the shaman is the repository of the culture, because these people do not have a written language, and he is an extremely important person. So here you can see, in defending the village, with spears, axes, and even in this modern age, an AK-47, well, I don't know, a machine gun of some sort. And on the other side you have similar weapons of defense. And all these incense sticks are burned regularly to keep the god Apollo happy. That's it. Alright, I'm sitting in one of the shelters that most fields in Thailand have, because people may have walked a long way to get here to do their farming, and then they have lunch. They don't go home for lunch, they have lunch in the field, so they have these little shelters which are basically for picnic lunches. Right, now I think we've seen that the hill tribes are in trouble, and in fact the cultures of hill tribes maybe will be extinct in a generation or so. Now, cultures come and cultures go, empires rise and fall. Does it matter if these hill tribe cultures do disappear? Well, I think it does. I mean, if a species of large animal were to become extinct, like a tiger or a panda, then there would be public outcry. But if a culture vanishes, it's almost like no one will notice. But it's more than just a culture. It's a way of thinking about the world. It's a method of farming. It's a type of medication. Who knows what things these hill tribe cultures know that we don't know. And also, we are now living in what is rapidly becoming a monoculture of Western materialism. It's spreading all around the world. Now, is a monoculture good? No, it's not, because you lose flexibility, you lose the ability to adapt to changes in the world. Whereas if we have lots of cultures, then there's more chance of some of them surviving and doing well, and I think that's why it's important that we try to keep these cultures alive. And I really do hope that a Karen or a Hmong or a Lisu, in 50 years' time, if you ask them what nationality they are, they will say, I'm Hmong, or I'm Lisu, or I'm Aka, and not I'm Thai, which is what a lot of them are starting to say already. And I think that's rather sad. Okay, so that's the end of episode 1. Episode 2 will be about the Karen. So watch this space in a few weeks. And I'm saying goodbye from Alisu village with my friends Atta and Amima. Akabumu. There you go. That's some nice Alisu to finish off. So do tune in next week and find out about the Karen, biggest hill tribe group in Thailand. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Oh, very good.
If you've enjoyed this video, then please become a subscriber, and then you can watch lots of other videos that we are going to produce on the hill tribes and on other aspects of life in Thailand, both for tourists and for people who are lucky enough to live in this beautiful country. So to become a subscriber, you just click on the subscriber button, I don't know where it is, somewhere on your screen, and we'll see you again very soon. And thank you for watching. Bye bye.